Hi. Hello, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us for this press conference. We're going to be recording this so we can post it for a few folks who let us know they wouldn't be able to be on live. Um, but we are going to go ahead and get started here, and just we'll continue to admit folks as they hop in. Want to welcome everybody on behalf of the organizations that are hosting this. We are going to have a brief overview of sort of the context. There was some breaking developments even last night in the budget committee. And so we'll speak to that and then give a little context, the updated where we're at this morning. And then you're going to hear from a handful of speakers in the following order. We'll hear from Dennis Feickert, who's the chairman of the South Dakota Property Rights and Local Control Alliance. We'll hear from Senator Joy Hone, who is active in the South Dakota Senate. We'll hear from Chuck Willard, the president of the South Dakota Stock Growers Association, and then Ed Fischbach, who is a board member of Dakota Rural Action. My name is Chase Jensen. I am the senior organizer at Dakota Rural Action, and will help facilitate the conversation here. We're aiming to have about 15 or so minutes of presentation, and then leaving about 15 minutes for any Q&A that y'all have, and then we'll let you get back to your busy days, busy jobs. So a word of context where we are. The focus of this press conference is a united voice from organizations across South Dakota that are watching what's happening in Washington, D.C. with the reconciliation process and concerned. Last week on Tuesday, the House Ways and Means Committee released text for their portion of the reconciliation bill that had some really terrible provisions in it. Including language that would transfer all the siting process from states to the federal government for oil pipelines, carbon dioxide pipelines, and hydrogen pipelines in the same manner that Congress has already taken siting authority for natural gas. So this would have been a direct override of any rules that states had put in place for zoning, for permitting, and then the ability to grant permits altogether. It would have also brought eminent domain authority with the federal siting powers. And so it was a huge threat to the landmark eminent domain protection that was just passed here in South Dakota this year. There's a few other pieces that were involved, some of which remain, including a provision that would allow an expedited permitting process, which still remains. And so companies are allowed to pay a $10 million fee and then have a expedited permitting review for environmental reviews. This would apply to pipelines and other major energy infrastructure, which would limit public input on decisions. It would hold the permitting process to a 1-year time frame with a 6-month allowance. But then if the agency applicable, FERC, if they were not able to get a decision in that time frame, the permit would automatically go forward and would be unappealable. And so very dangerous in our opinions. There's also many changes to the energy tax credit programs included in the Inflation Reduction Act. However, as it currently stands, there have been no significant changes that we would see as positive. So the 45Q tax credits applied to carbon capture and storage. And so this one program in particular is not being touched, while many others are being cut or gutted altogether. And we believe this is a pretty bad tax credit program, both in the history of fraud and abuse and also in the unprovenness of the industry itself, the failure of many major carbon storage projects in our nation and around the world. So as of right now, the language was removed last night that would bring permitting to the federal government. So permitting will still remain at the state level, which is a big victory There was a national outpouring of concern through this last week when that happened. And so last night that language was removed in the
I don't
budget.
know if it's just me or what. I think he's
Oh, so that is where we are. And we are here today unified, asking that Representative Dusty Johnson would stand with the state of South Dakota and move to repeal the 45Q tax credit altogether in the reconciliation process. We also are opposed to the expedited permitting, the language that still remains in the reconciliation text. I'm going to pass it over to Dennis Feickert, the chairman of the South Dakota Property Rights and Local Control Alliance, to share a little bit about their organization's history on this issue. Dennis, go ahead.
Thank you, Chase. Thank you for the opportunity to introduce myself. Dennis Feickert, served 20 years on the Brown County Commission. And then I was elected, served 8 years in the South Dakota State Legislature, and then was reelected after 8 years in the South Dakota State Legislature, elected to serve another term on the Brown County Commission. About 3 years ago, the South Dakota Property Rights and Local Control Alliance was formed, and it was formed by a group of patriots that were fighting to protect property rights and local control. It was, I believe, 2 years ago that a bill, Senate Bill 201, was passed to allow Summit Carbon Solutions to basically take away local control, step all over property rights, and put in a pipeline through South Dakota. That the group, South Dakota Property Rights and Local Control Group, they carried petitions for a referral of Senate Bill 201. It was RL 21, and of 66 counties in South Dakota, 65 voted to repeal that bill. And so that was the first no. And then no pipeline. Then in, I believe it was 2 years ago, the South Dakota Supreme Court ruled that Summit Carbon Solutions is not a common carrier and that CO2 is not a commodity. And that was a big victory. That was the second no. Then in this past legislative session, South Dakota Senate Bill 1052 removed the opportunity for Summit Carbon Solutions to use eminent domain to run over private property to put in pipeline, CO2 pipelines. And so that was the third no. And I think that at this point, we're basically asking Dusty Johnson, Congressman Johnson, to sign on to the reconciliation bill. Let's do away with the 45Q tax credits. It is nothing more than a transfer of wealth. Dusty Johnson obviously has aspirations of further political move in South Dakota. He knows what's going on here in South Dakota. He needs to step up. He needs to support South Dakota, get away from the big corporations, and support the South Dakota property rights and local control. And so we're hoping that he will get behind South Dakota and help us out. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. Now we are going to transfer over here and hear from District 9 Senator Joy Hone.
Well, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. My name is Joy Hone, and I am a landowner west of Sioux Falls. My family and I are continuing on with my parents' legacy in our family farming operation, which includes my brother, my husband, our son and his wife, and our daughter. And the intrusion of private property rights started in our family about 10 years ago with Dakota Access. And since then, our family has been condemned by both the oil and the carbon pipelines. And we have been involved with the 3 PUC permitting processes one for the Dakota Access, and then the last couple through Summit Carbon Solutions. And just to add on a little bit to what Dennis was saying as far as our wins, the PUC has denied 3 inadequate permits of these carbon pipeline companies. And so over the past 4 years, I've been involved with the people of our great state, and we have worked tirelessly to protect our private property rights. It's a reason why I ran for senator. I wanted to be a citizen legislator and to be a voice for the people. In doing so, I helped get House Bill 1052 across the floor. And that just shows that South Dakotans have been clear, and we have voted down the use of eminent domain for these carbon pipelines. Our governor signed the bill into law with a powerful letter accompanying it. Last night, it was good to see that they removed the federal citing authority, but the expedited permit process still in the bill that would allow companies to abuse landowners right across our borders is very concerning. And so we have done everything that we can do, and it's now up to our federal delegation. Right now, it's Congressman Johnson's turn to step forward to repeal the 45Q tax credits, which has been the driving force, and then also to remove that expedited permitting. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Senator. Now we are going to pivot and hear from Chuck Willard, the president of the South Dakota Stock Growers Association.
Excuse me, it's Beth Warden with Dakota News Now. Can everyone center themselves in the camera so I can use this for a newscast? So look at how Chase is centered and try to do the same if you could. I need room below your chin to put your name and title. So if you can back away from the camera if you need to, just look at how Chase is. That's perfect. And that's what I need to do the news story. Thank you very much.
Hi, this is Chuck. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. We
All
can't see
righty.
your video, but we can hear you.
All righty. This is Chuck Willard. I'm a rancher from Belvedere, South Dakota. Ranch has been in the family for generations. And I'm also the president of the South Dakota Stock Grower Association. We're the oldest stock grower livestock producers in the state. And we have been supportive of property rights from the very beginning. Our organization has been very active, and we have policy on this. We felt that this was an overreach of government, which seems to be taking a place across the country. And so I just thank the speakers before me, what they've done and what they're doing. And we saw a huge, I guess, the people of South Dakota spoke in our last elections. We acquired about 26 new legislatures and replaced the ones that were supporting the eminent domain and the, not the eminent domain, but the carbon pipeline. We will continue to work with our membership and with our people and with our state to make sure that we, the people, are the ones that get to talk. Government is getting way too big, and so we really need to keep an eye on them. We don't want a fox in the henhouse. So I support this. I urge Congressman Johnson to listen. He is a South Dakotan. I think the people in South Dakota have spoke, and so I hope that he takes this very seriously. Thank you.
Thank you, Chuck. And lastly, we are going to hear from Dakota Rural Action board member Ed Fischbach. And Ed, it looks like you're muted, so you'll need to hit *6 to unmute on your phone. Looks like you're still muted. If you can hit *6 on your dial pad, that will unmute you. Okay, so you're unmuted.
Okay, now you can hear me?
Yep, go ahead.
Okay. Yes. Hi, I'm Ed Fischbach. I am a farmer in northern Spink County. And as Jay said, I'm a member of Dakota Rural Action and also a member of the South Dakota Easement Team. And we formed that easement team almost 4 years ago now, when I was first initially contacted and I was going to have the carbon pipeline crossing my property. And so that's been my involvement from the beginning. And when we hired legal counsel, we got involved, Dakota Rural Action did, to stop this project from going forward. As other speakers have noted, South Dakota has spoken loud and clear on how they feel about this project. And so I want to focus particularly on the 45Q tax credits and point out that this is nothing more than a corporate welfare program giveaway to billionaires. It's funded entirely by all of us that are taxpayers. There's documented cases of fraud that's occurred in this in the past. So we feel that this program needs to be eliminated completely. Another part of the bill and the reconciliation bill that's come to our attention, not only are they taking advantage of the taxpayer dollars on the 45Q tax, but if this goes through with that provision in it yet, these corporations that are profiting unnecessarily off of the taxpayers also will not have to pay any federal income tax on any profits that they make off of that. And that's another part that needs to be stricken from the record and out of the bill. And so I would call on Congressman Johnson. There is a bill in the House sponsored by Representative Scott Perry of Pennsylvania, Republican, and Representative Ro Khanna, Democrat from California, that are calling for the elimination of the 45Q tax credit completely. We would hope that Congressman Johnson would sign on to that legislation and make it a part of the reconciliation bill if that's going to go forward. And so Congressman Johnson should know full well how the people of South Dakota feel, how they have spoken in the legislative process, in the judicial process, and the ballot box. So that's what we were calling on Congressman Johnson to do. And we would hope that he would listen to the wishes of the people and not side with any of the corporate interests that are there in Washington lobbying for this type of legislation. Thank you.
Well, thank you all. We will open it up now for any questions that reporters may have. You're welcome to drop them in the chat or also unmute and ask directly.
John Holt, South Dakota Searchlight. I'm curious if you can walk me again through what happened last night and what remains, just sort of like straight down the middle, because there was a bit of an audio flub, I think, when you first laid that out earlier on. So
Thank you. Yes. So originally, or I'll say the things that were presented last week and taken out last night included the new federal permitting process for carbon dioxide, hydrogen, and petroleum or oil pipelines. That was in section 41006. That has been struck from the bill. That was the portion that would give federal eminent domain authority for those types of pipelines in the same way that they currently have for natural gas. That was removed. That also had a $10 million fee to apply for that federal permit or license, and would have given FERC that exclusive siting authority. All state and local siting laws or ordinances would have been overturned by that. Would have been the federal equivalent of what would have happened in South Dakota if SB 201 had gone into effect from the state to local. The things that still remain are companies are still able to pay another $10 million fee to expedite environmental reviews or permitting proceedings that do require FERC approval for large energy projects or pipelines. And the review clock for that would then be capped at a year if they pay this fee, with a possible 6-month extension. But if the agency misses the deadline, the project can move forward without their approval, and it actually becomes a non-appealable permit or approval of the project. What also remains is the 45Q tax credit program is still intact, even though many other tax programs from the Inflation Reduction Act are being cut or reduced or sunsetted much earlier. And so the most egregious permitting changes were taken out. However, the underlying funding mechanism for the carbon capture and sequestration industry remains intact. The one change that has been introduced for that is that it bans some foreign ownership of the tax credits, which, as we would note, gives a monopoly for American billionaires to benefit from this abuse-prone tax program. And then there is, lastly, the carbon capture industry would be allowed to organize itself as, and here I make sure I say the correct term. Or maybe I'll have to look that up, the exact name of it. It's eluding me now. A publicly traded partnership. And so they would be allowed to receive the tax credits in like that organizational model and not report it as profit. And so benefit from these programs, basically double dip, get the tax credit and then not have to report that for their own profits they're making.
Just one follow-up there. What is the environmental permitting process now? If it's a year, maybe a year and 6 months under this provision, is it sort of indefinite at this point?
I could not give a clear answer right now, depending on which type of project it were, but couldn't get back to you with an answer on that today.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Hello there, it's Beth Warden with Dakota News Now. Do you have any dollar amounts for that 45Q, just what the total was or an estimate?
Yes, I do have some numbers. In April of 2020, the Treasury, actually, that's gonna tell you how much abuse happened. Let me give you the number here. Yes, the cost estimates in 2021, the Treasury Department estimated that over the next 10 years, the 45Q program would cost $20 billion. And then a year later, their estimate bumped up to $30.6 billion. However, research that was done by the Institute for Energy Economics and Financial Analysis, the IEEFA, found that the current 45Q program could cost taxpayers over $800 billion over the lifetime of the program. And a few notes on the 45Q program: it currently closes in 2032, but any project that would qualify for it has 12 years where they get paid out for participating. The current rates are $85 a metric ton for any for carbon dioxide that is sequestered underground, and $65 per metric ton for every metric ton of CO2 that's used for enhanced oil recovery or pumping more oil out of the ground. There are very few provisions with the IRS of how companies that are claiming tax credits can actually verify that they have done this. And so that is where, first thing I was quoting, in April of 2020, the Treasury Department's Inspector General for the Tax Administration found that 10 taxpayers had claimed over $1 billion in 45Q tax credits from 2010 to 2019. And this was roughly 99% of the credits claimed in the 45Q program. And of the $1 billion claimed, credits that were worth $894 million of that did not comply with the EPA's requirements for reporting that how the carbon was sequestered or that it was sequestered. So a large majority of the credits that were claimed were found to not even comply with the things that do exist now. And there is serious concern for abuse and fraud. There are also larger challenges that we would make to the program as it stands. After a set number of years, carbon that was sequestered, that companies received the $85 per ton payment for tax credit, that could be brought back up and used for enhanced oil recovery with no fee. I believe that's a 15-year wait period. And if they do it before, there's a small fee associated. But there's many ways that this program is paying out or potentially paying out twice, that the taxpayers are the ones who are footing the bill. And I see that a link has been dropped in the chat to the IEFA report.
And then I also am wondering if Senator Hone could respond to this. If you could sit down and have a cup of coffee with Johnson today, what would you say to him or ask him to do?
You are muted. There
Can
you
you hear me now?
Yes.
Sure can.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Well, I have heard from many constituents in my district and also concerned citizens across the state, and they're upset about what is happening in Washington, D.C. They feel that it's out of line for the federal government to be getting involved in a lot of these areas. It's not for the public good. It's driven by the 45Q tax credits, and they're just wanting Congressman Johnson to step up and take a stand, repeal these 45Q tax credits, and also that expedited permitting process.
Hey, this is Alberto Sanchez with Pluribus News. What do you attribute the federal act? Why did the lawmakers in Washington drop that provision that you guys didn't like? What do you attribute that to?
Yeah, I would open space for others to respond as well. I am very aware of the national outcry that occurred when that language was proposed. If you can think of any controversial pipeline fight in the last 2 decades, it likely fell into the categories that this addressed, with oil or carbon dioxide or hydrogen. And so the move to shift that all federal impacted every community that had a problem with a pipeline coming through and sought to be involved in the local permitting. And so folks all across the board, in the north, the south, the east, the west, native, non-native, oil, carbon dioxide, all people saw this as a direct corporate response to the fights that have occurred and the standing that citizens and local governments have had in those processes, which often to the companies may feel like a unwanted input. They would rather just buy their permit from the federal government. So when that language was released, all the networks from all the community organizations, all the government to government relationships that had formed from these past fights, all those people immediately were activated and started reaching out. And it was known immediately that this was going to be a non-starter in Congress.
I think we're also finding that it's unusual, like our landowner groups are now pairing up with the environmental rights groups and uniting to make, a collaborative effort to stop this legislation.
Any other? I see a question here from SDPB with the 41006 struck and being the largest reason for public disapproval. What's the level of concern if the remaining language remains and does pass? I would say that for the folks who are following this issue closely, who understand 45Q tax credits and how they operate as the funding mechanism for this nationwide infrastructure rollout that the industry wants to do, it would be a major missed opportunity, I would say. the central issue, I would say, for critics of the carbon capture industry is that the federal government right now has a clear desire to root out waste, fraud, and abuse. And they're cutting many programs out there that are either public assistance programs or renewable energy tax credits. They are looking at a lot of different places. And the fact that one of the biggest opportunities for abuse and fraud is being safeguarded, that's kind of insane. And so for us, because the topic of fraud and abuse is open, I would say this is the best opportunity that's likely to happen for a very long time in Congress for the problems with this tax credit to be addressed. And so if it is missed, I think it's going to be a huge concern to the folks who understand how it's happening right now. And then as we move forward, if this 45Q tax program remains intact, they're talking about building close to 100,000 miles of carbon dioxide pipelines in particular, for example. That's twice the infrastructure footprint of the interstate system in our country. There's going to be huge numbers of communities throughout the nation that are impacted by this industry who will come to learn about the 45Q tax credit program and continue to ramp pressure, even if backwards, on Congress for allowing this to remain in the bill, remain in law. I also think in South Dakota specifically, as was noted, we're very clear on this. And so there is also a deep awareness of 45Q in South Dakota, which may not be the case in some states that haven't been impacted yet. And so it is going to continue to be a hot button issue here. And folks who want to continue in leadership in our state are going to be on the record, either supporting or opposing this. And I believe that that will be a very important political point in the future. Yes, I'll open this question to the group. If Representative Johnson is a yes vote on the language as it currently stands, what message does that send to his constituents?
I'll just make a quick comment. To me, it just simply shows that he's not truly been paying attention to the wishes of the South Dakota public, the South Dakota people, in that on 3 different occasions, the people said no. And if Congressman Johnson hasn't witnessed that or paid attention to that, he's been sleeping. And so we're hoping that he does the right thing on this bill.
And I would echo those comments also, that everything that's been happening, not only have the people spoken, the Supreme Court here in the state of South Dakota has spoken, the voters have spoken, the Public Utilities Commission has spoken on 3 different permit rejections, that he certainly has to know how the people feel. And I think it would be wise to him to heed their advice and to vote against this provision of this reconciliation bill.
Yes, and to echo those comments, pretty much everything that can be done in South Dakota has been done at the state level with what jurisdiction we have, the county level, the state level, the legislature, the courts. It is now time for our congressional representatives to stand with the people on this issue. And it would be probably the first major departure that's not referable by the people from public sentiment on this topic. So it would send a very big message.
And I agree with that as well, Congressman Johnson, that he needs to be proactive for the people of South Dakota. They've been fighting this fight for the last 4 years. And, initially they told us that it was up to local governments and the state. They've taken action, and now it's up to our federal delegation. So we really urge Congressman Johnson to do the right thing and stand for the people of South Dakota.
The week after the South Dakota legislature passed House Bill 1052 and the governor signed it into law, a group from South Dakota went along with folks all across the nation being impacted by the carbon capture industry and met with our congressional offices to educate them about the 45Q tax credit and what had been going on in South Dakota. And we were informed by a member of the Representative Johnson's office that, of course, in the House, with so many members, you really only get one hill to die on during the reconciliation process as compared to the Senate. We are calling on Representative Johnson to die on this hill. We want to see the 45Q tax credit removed from law through the reconciliation process, along with, at the same time that so many other things are being scrutinized and changed. And so that is the call that we are asking from South Dakota, united with folks all across the nation who have been impacted by this industry.
Chase, I have another comment here too. There were many of the South Dakota Property Rights and Local Control Alliance individuals, the patriots that were fighting for property rights and local control that on several occasions had asked Congressman Dusty Johnson to meet with them and to hear out, to listen to what the concerns were of the South Dakota people. And Congressman Dusty Johnson said that it was a state issue, that it was not a federal issue. Well, now it is a federal issue, and he has the opportunity to react to what the people are calling for in South Dakota. Congressman Johnson needs to do the right thing and support the South Dakota people.
Thank you. Any final questions? I see from John, my understanding that reconciliation can't really be used for policy decisions like environmental reviews. I believe that's correct, and I'm not the most knowledgeable on the specifics of the reconciliation process, but with the bird rule needing some connection to money, I believe that the belief of industry and the writers of that think that because they are allowing for a $10 million payment for an expedited review, that hopefully will be like a bird hook and allow that policy change to go through along with the fee, the addition of that fee. That's my understanding of it. There is still a question of whether that provision is legal at all for the reconciliation process. But you'd have to talk to someone a lot smarter than me to get the particulars on that. All right, I'll hold for one more second if there's any other questions. Otherwise, we will be sending out a recording of this and posting it online through the Dakota Rural Action social media channels. Thank you all for being here, and have a good rest of your Monday.